worried because they want to make sure you're really secure in life. So they want you to have the comfortable job that's more secure because they love you. And so the way that's coming off the comment sounds like the career you're choosing is terrible. So you're making a terrible choice. But they're just expressing their love through their way.
Yes.
But I think the words shame and guilt are the big words that I identify with. And I think we see in the way we were parented, where it's like, if you didn't do something, you were bad, right? Like there was labeling of when you weren't good enough or didn't do things. And so that guilt and that shame kind of then grows into our adulthood.
Yeah.
But I love that we're helping the kids. Like, I kind of love the internet for this because, like we said, people before us didn't have the resources, whereas now we are open to so many resources, sometimes too many resources. But we do have these resources to help in general.
When it comes to those voices, so I learned this when I studied neurolinguistic programming, and as the director, as the recorder, as the perceiver of this voice coming in, you can actually play with that voice. So when you hear a recording, go in and think, now, if this person had the voice of Mickey Mouse, how might that sound? If this voice sounded like Goofy, what might that sound like? Right. And as you do, so you're smiling, as you notice the intensity completely changes. It's a feeling that it's triggering. So when we can change the recording, when we can even, sometimes, you'll have whatever negative thought or person is coming up, and they're really, really close in front of your face, move them back, shrink them down to a teeny tiny size of a postage stamp, and send them clear across the way, however far you want, whatever feels great for you. And notice how that feeling completely left, because it's the feelings that are driving the boat. And they're really, that they're eliciting an emotion from us. So when we can change the feeling, we can change the emotion. And that is so much better.
It's so scary to me, the fact that we all just kind of live our lives driven by feelings and emotions, right? Like a lot of choices that we make, when I think of that analogy, right, I'm like, oh, I heard the voice, there was an interaction, then I did this following action, this whole cause and effect within the communication. But imagining, like, putting a silliness to it and deflating it completely, when you're just like, oh, it's just words. But what if like a fish said it underwater? Yeah. That'd be silly.
Yeah.
So it's nothing but silly. Like,
so we have pictures and voices, and this is how we perceive the world. So when you can start to play with those recordings, it becomes so much better. And it's an art. It's not something that will just immediately overnight. If it does, that's great for you. It didn't for me, so power to you if it does overnight. But it becomes an art, and when you can start to notice this and say, oh, what if I change the emotion? What if I change the recording to change the emotion that I'm getting? You get back in the driver's seat, and then you can quite literally perceive whatever it is you want. And if people are saying, well, why don't you take that stable career, or why don't you do this? And you're like, that again, it's hurtful to us, and we have this great emotional response of being human, and it is hurtful to us. And it's not to say that it's not hurtful, but then you can separate and say, okay, that's on them. That's how they perceive the world. To have a stable career, to know where your predictable paycheck is coming from, that's what works for them. This is what works for me. And being able to separate that and understand, like, thank you for your input, I appreciate it. I'm going to put it in my collection box over here, and that's where it'll stay, because I don't need to adopt this and think I'm not good enough because I'm not having a salary and I'm working by somebody else's standards. That's a value and criteria of that person. This is what's important to me. And that's when you start to be able to separate that and to not take it on as our own. It is that extra thought process of thinking about it and saying, okay, that's what's important to you, what's important to me. And that's where your power is. When you can start to respond in that way, you start to shift those feelings, you start to have better emotions, and you get back in the driver's seat.
I love that so much. I'm trying to picture it, how can we help our kids understand this at a young age? Because as a parent, it's often, I need you to listen to me, right? And when we say, I hear parents sometimes like, oh, my kid's not listening to me, they didn't do this. I'm like, well, they're not, you're saying they're not obeying, right? They probably listen, they heard you. They're not obeying is what you're expressing. And then there's that control shift where it's like,
I'm the parent.
Right. Which is important when it comes to a safety or a dangerous situation. It's totally important. They absolutely should know. Like if they're running across the street and you need to get them, there's a car coming, it's a situation, like 400%. Like do what you need to.
Totally.
Safety is always first.
Totally.
But I am thinking about, okay, how do I present this way of thinking to my daughter now where she feels responsible? She does this cute thing right now where she picked up the word decided. She goes, I decided to sit here. I decided I'm going to go over. Like, great decision. I love it. Isn't that so? She came in. I decided to sit here. Okay, sweetheart. Yes, more of that. Right? But I don't want to swim way too far with it because then it's like, we're still a household and I am the parent and the guardian. I do need to be in control because if I let her just go wild, so then it's maybe finding the safety where it's like, hey, when we set some sort of rules, boundaries that if it's a safety situation, hey, this is a key word. When I say banana muffin, everybody listens to me because it's an emergency, right? And maybe give them that because I'd love for kids to learn that ability, but it would be hard to do it or ask parents to do it in a way where they feel, I don't want them to feel powerless because there's going to be times that come in, they need to, so it's maneuvering that way of helping our kids feel responsible and accountable. I guess if you just model it, if you model the,
Absolutely.
Right.
That and on a daily basis, if I decided to sit here and she's sitting in front of the TV during dinner time and you guys usually have dinner at the family table. Okay, well, I'm glad you decided that. But right now we're going to do this because this is where we have this, and redirecting and justifying. Because once we say, because I said so, it doesn't have enough justification because they're like, well, what about me? Because you also told me to make my own decisions. And that can be really confusing. So when we say we're going to do this because we're offering them that justification of, yes, obviously we're the parent, we're the guardian, we're taking care of them, but it's because this is where we have dinner and it's important to us. Right. Because this is what we do and this is important because why do I have to get in the tub? Well, it's important because we're covered in dirt and we were outside and we want to make sure that we get to go to sleep in a nice clean, when we're nice and clean and go to bed that way. That's offering them additional support because that will make sense to them. Oh, do you want to sleep in mud? And to also offer that ongoing encouragement of supportive nurturing and knowing when to use your firm voice and knowing when to use your gentle voice and building that ongoing trust. When children can't predict to some extent how you'll respond, that puts them into a survival mode of, I don't know what to expect, so maybe I just need to really, and they get really, really guarded. If you look at it as your child and you are in a building, trusting relationship, and every day you build your trust, just like we do with our significant others. Every day we build that trust. Every day we're showing up for them to the best of our ability. Some days we show up great. Woohoo! Some days we show up less than great. It's okay. It's to the best of our ability. So to always also have compassion for yourself and kindness for yourself that says, I'm doing the best. It's okay. And saying, if you do snap at somebody, I apologize. I didn't do that on purpose. Sometimes it happens, and I'm really sorry about that. And honoring that sincere response, and to never say it's going to happen again, probably unlikely. We're human.
Yeah.
Be okay with being human, but also hold yourself to that standard that says, I'm doing the best I can. And maybe today wasn't great, but I will do my best tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I will keep going from that standpoint. And having those open discussions with children of expressing, what did you think would happen there? How might you have responded? If you're in a storybook and somebody, there's a conflict in the storybook, how else might we have responded? What else do you think we could do? And asking those questions throughout their entire life will help them understand thought flexibility, will help them perceive, oh, this was the problem. Here are additional solutions. Mommy said she was going to do this. Daddy said he was going to do this. And I think I'm going to do this. And just giving different insights are all building this beautiful language foundation, but also this beautiful thought process of being able to think in different ways and
Right.
to have that supportive inside, because now I have thought flexibility. I wasn't told I was right or wrong. I was told, oh, I had this perception, and oh, somebody supported it. Oh, they had a really good one, and I supported them too. It's a back and a forth.
I love that. I'm a big fan of explaining and over-explaining because of my trauma, but I think it helps me in parenthood where I explain everything to her, where now I'm noticing when she comments about something, she'll explain why she got to that idea, right? So it's like, oh, it rolled off of this, it'll roll off of this. Let's see if it'll roll off of that. Mommy, is it going to roll or is it going to get stuck like the other one? Let's find out together. And so including that including the explanation of why things happen, we do this, we do that. Plus, I think it's super helpful